Welcome back. I'm that Halloween movie collector, Pat. This time I'm going to take a look at my top 5 favorite horror movies from the 1960s. I'm going to go decade by decade, whittle it down to my 5 favorite. Well, it's always hard to do top 5. I know most people do top 10s. I just like to keep these videos short. I'll probably do some more longer form ones and maybe second parts to some of these because there's a lot of movies in each decade, especially the 70s and the 80s, where it's real hard for me to whittle it down to 5. But I figure I'll start with the 1960s, and I did whittle down to my top 5. There's probably some surprises on here and some that aren't too surprising to you horror fans. I'll probably get a lot of hate for not including any Vincent Price movies on here. While I do love Vincent Price movies and, early Hammer films, I just, had to go with the top 5 that were my particular favorites. Starting with number 5, Hush, Hush, Sweet Charlotte from 1964, starring the incredible Bette Davis. Some of you younger folks don't know who Bette Davis is. Go look at Bette Davis. Amazing actress, one of the most visually stunning faces, and mostly her eyes. I mean, if you go back to the 80s, there's a song by Kim Carnes called Bette Davis Eyes, just because of just her visual expressions and what a great actress she was. And this was probably my favorite Bette Davis movie, easily, Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte. And the premise of Hush Hush, Sweet Charlotte, if you haven't seen it, is basically, it's played by Bette Davis, who plans to run off with a married man. When Charlotte's father finds out about this, he intervenes and exposes the married man and tries to call it off. He confronts Charlotte about not wanting to run off with her, and eventually later on at the father's house in the pool area, the pool house, he's eventually decapitated and murdered, and she's the one that's getting blamed for it, Charlotte. Now, fast forward many 30 plus years later, and I don't remember the exact how many years. It's 30 some odd years. It's been a while since I watched it. I should have revisited it before this, but I pretty much remember most of it. And she's inherited the house. Her father's since passed on, and she lives there with a housekeeper who's loyal and helps take care of her. And she's sort of known as like a little bit of a wacko in the community. And she slowly descends into, she sees visions of his decapitated head and is talking to him. It's just tortured her all these years. And then she has other family members come, and they're trying to help her when they're, really trying to bilk some of the money out of her. And she's actually, what really sets her over the edge is the highway commission comes in and they're looking to evict her because they want to put a highway through the area, sort of like eminent domain. And she goes off the deep end even further than that. Now, eventually there's a real good twist ending, who reveals the killer. And if you haven't, granted, I could spoil it. It's, 50 plus year old movie. But in case you haven't seen it, go check it out. But it's a real cool twist ending. You'll find out who really did kill the lover. Go check it out. It's a great movie. It's got a lot of, if you've seen a lot of the older films and older TV shows, it's got some real great cameos from a lot of the famous actors and actresses I've loved over the years, like Agnes Moorehead, if you know who Agnes Moorehead is. And Dora from the TV show Bewitched. She also starred in The Invaders, the Twilight Zone episode. One of my favorite episodes. I'm a big Twilight Zone fan. Where she is an older woman, younger woman actually, because she was young at the time. And these alien invaders come down, and it turns out to be spacemen from Earth, and she's a giant living on a planet. It's just a great episode. Victor Buono's in there, who starred in several Odd Couple episodes, along with the Twilight Zone and the TV show, which is my favorite I grew up with, is The Odd Couple, and he starred in 2 memorable episodes of The Odd Couple, where he's the landlord, and he's just out of his friggin' mind, and another one where he plays like what should we call it? Somebody doing an exorcism because Oscar and Felix think that their air conditioner is haunted. Just some great stuff. Not to go on and on. And George Kennedy, young George Kennedy. If you guys are fans of the Naked Gun series, you remember, George Kennedy's been in a lot of stuff, but, if you're a big comedy fan, you remember George Kennedy from the Naked Gun movies. But there's a lot of cameos and people you probably recognize in Hush Hush Sweet Charlotte. Go check it out. Good movie. My number 4, Eyes Without a Face. Now, this is a French movie that came out in 1960, and which heavily influenced Halloween. John Carpenter pretty much gives credit for them for really it influencing him, going towards it and creating Halloween. And that's actually when I first found it. When I heard years ago about it and how it had influenced Halloween, I went back and watched it. And I'm not a big fan of dubbed movies because, I like to watch a movie. I don't like to read it. But this is a creepy, creepy movie. The mask is ultra creepy, which is, where John Carpenter sort of not got every inspiration for the Myers mask. But what he was looking for was just that blank, neutral feature that does not exist on a person's face. And this is the movie to watch. It's about a girl named Christiane whose father is a plastic surgeon, and they get into this horrible accident. Her face is disfigured, and he spends his life trying to figure out a way to graft a different face on because he feels responsible for it. So he keeps kidnapping women and unsuccessfully trying to graft their skin onto the daughter's face. And he does have an assistant that's helping him, who was somebody whose face he was able to fix through plastic surgery, who's loyal to him. And she's the one that's dumping the bodies. And of course, the police are intervened because they're wondering where these women are being reported missing. And slowly but surely, Christiane starts to, just fall apart because of what's going on. Her father's killing all these people, trying to get her face, and he's slowly going mad. She's slowly going mad, and eventually it culminates in. The police do show up, and he manages to convince the police that there's nothing going on, and she just wants to get away from him. And he has a bunch of German Shepherd dogs that he was going to use for some experiments, and she unleashes the dogs who just kill him, and she just walks off. It would have been great to see if they did a part 2 to this, and she just goes off, and you never really know what happens to her after that. But it's just a creepy. I mean, anything. A lot of the black and white films always tend to give you that real creepy vibe, and this movie is very, very creepy, and it's just a great watch. I would say, if you're a fan of Halloween, and if you've heard of this as being cited by John Carpenter as an influence, be sure to go check it out. It's pretty cool. Number 3, Rosemary's Baby, 1968. The classic from Roman Polanski. I mean, I don't know what I can say about this. If you're a horror fan and you haven't seen Rosemary's Baby, the original Rosemary's Baby, go back and watch it. It's just a fantastic movie. Mia Farrow and just played a perfect part as this innocent woman who's just happily married to her husband, John Cassavetes, and they're having a baby, and they're living in this beautiful apartment building and home, and they have friends around them in the building who she thinks, will love and support them. And slowly but surely, she's starting to notice odd things with her husband and the neighbors, and it turns out they're all part of a satanic cult, and the baby that she has inside of her is the devil's child. Yes, the devil's child. So it's just a great, great movie. Creepy atmosphere. Some really cool people are in it, like Ruth Gordon, who... Ruth Gordon's been in tons of things, but I always loved her as Philo Beto's mother in Every Which Way But Loose, just sitting on the porch with a shotgun. I mean, she's been in a bunch of stuff, but that's just something that always stands out as my favorite role with Ruth Gordon, besides being in Rosemary's Baby. But it's great. The whole twist at the end, when she finds out and they're convincing her, look, you're you're the child's mother, and they're hailing Satan, and he's got the devil's eyes, and she's freaking out because she thinks they did something to the baby's eyes. Just a creepy, creepy atmosphere. I mean, it was groundbreaking, especially for the time, 1968. Fantastic movie. Go watch it. There was, several part 2s and remakes, but nothing beats the original. Go back and watch it. Number 2, 1968, Night of the Living Dead. One of my favorite movies of all time. Not just a film from 1968. Groundbreaking in every way. Has a lot of social commentary it's very underlying, but if you delve into it, you sort of see it more and more. There's some great documentaries on the making of this. Go back and watch it. George Romero was brilliant. Just a great movie start to finish. There's just not much I could say about this other than I watch it all the time. Even I don't just wait till Halloween. I watch it all the time. It appears in one of my favorite films, Halloween 2, famously in the background there. There has been a remake, which I'm not a big fan of. Several so-called sequels to it, like Return of the Living Dead, which were fantastic, but it just spawned the whole zombie thing right out of the brain of George Romero. I mean, the whole plot, if you haven't seen it, I mean, if you're a horror fan, you should have seen Night of the Living Dead by now. It is, there's a brother and sister going to visit their dead father in a cemetery, and they see and the brother's complaining the whole time because he didn't want to go out there, and they see this man stalking, and he's trying to scare her because he thinks she's always being scared in the cemetery. And eventually it turns out the guy attacks her, and he's trying to defend her, and she's running away, and she runs up to this farmhouse, and the man chases her, and eventually this other gentleman shows up, African-American gentleman who's there, and he's running too. Long story short, turns out they're all running from these zombies, and they're trying to figure out who the living dead are, and they eat human flesh, and they're all penned up in this house, and he boards it all up. Eventually find out in the basement, there's a family in the basement with a little girl who's been bitten by a zombie, who eventually turns into a zombie and kills the mother. And it culminates in so much fun, such great tension, great visuals, just amazing stuff. And there's also a boyfriend and girlfriend who are downstairs as well. Fantastic film. If you haven't seen it, I went and saw it for the first time on big screen a couple years ago, back in 2018 for the 50th anniversary. They had a screening, and I went with my son, and they had a whole intro interviewing all the people that worked on it and just talking about it's such a great movie. If you haven't seen Night of the Living Dead, there's seriously something wrong with you. Go check it out. And of course, number one, 1960, Psycho. If this isn't at the top of every list, I don't know what is. What can I say about Psycho that hasn't been said? Alfred Hitchcock's masterpiece. Anthony Perkins, brilliant. I mean, come on. Janet Leigh, her daughter, right here in Halloween, in one of my favorite movies. You gotta love Psycho. And if you haven't seen it, go see it. I mean, the premise is basically simple. There's a hotel on the outskirts inhabited by a son who had killed his mother years before. And this woman, played by Janet Leigh, who runs off with a bunch of money from a bank that she stole. She's on the run, and she ends up staying there, and he's infatuated with her, and he eventually kills her because what happens? In his mind, anytime anybody gets close to him, he dresses up like his mother, and he's a split personality and kills that person. So eventually killed that, and then slowly but surely, people are, of course, looking for her. It turns out to be her sister and the boyfriend, and they make their way to the Bates Motel, and they uncover everything through interviewing him. It's just such great acting by Anthony Perkins, just perfectly playing that psycho, and it's just great dialogue, great visuals. I mean, it's an Alfred Hitchcock movie. I mean, what more can you say? And this, as far as I'm concerned, has the best sequel ever, which I'll probably get a lot of hate for this. I like even more, Psycho 2. Psycho 2 is just a fantastic movie, and everybody, I remember when it was coming out back in '82, people were, oh, you can't, it's a classic, you can't touch that, and they nailed it. I mean, thank God, they had Anthony Perkins come back, original, and it's just great movie. I don't know what more can be said about Psycho, but that is my number one horror film of the 1960s. There's a lot of horror films in the 1960s because it really came into prominence where it started to get out of like the dungeons of castles and, all the original Universal monsters, which I'm not knocking. I love them myself. I'll probably do a ranking on those one day too. But it evolved through the 60s, and it really started with Psycho, where it took it out of those gothic mansions and brought it into everyday life, because there's horror in everyday life. Why not throw it up on the screen? Those are my top 5. If you have a top 5, please put them below. I'd love to hear your top 5 horror movies from the 60s. There's tons of them there. Like I said, probably get a lot of hate for not putting in, some Vincent Price movies, which I do love. Maybe I'll just do the separate ranking on that because he was brilliant, as we all know that. But this was fun to do. This was fun to put together. I'm going to go probably decade by decade, so I'll probably do the 70s next, and that's going to be a real daunting. Well, the next couple of ones will be real daunting, the 70s, the 80s, because there's so much in the 70s and the 80s. 90s, 2000s, there's some good stuff. I'm not going to argue, but the 70s, 80s got really tough to whittle down to my top 5. So if you like this video, you like any horror collectibles, Halloween collectibles, go check out my Instagram page, which is at that Halloween movie collector, where my whole collection is. And I'll post stuff about my collection. I'll post videos I'll be doing. Go check it out. Subscribe. Just a lot of fun. Every Sunday at 8 p.m. Eastern Time, I do the Halloween Collectors Podcast, where we do talk about collections, collecting, horror movies, interviews, guests, drink a lot, and just make asses of ourselves. So over on the Michael's Horror and Pinball channel, go check it out. It's just a lot of fun. And there's a podcast Facebook group. Go join it. We list what's going on in the group. Be sure and you'll check out and see what's going on. Also, there is the Halloween and Michael Myers Collectors group in Facebook land, which is for all you Halloween collectors, Halloween fans. There's buy, sell, and trade people in there. There's anything you can think of about Halloween is in that group. The Halloween Movie Collector is also on Twitter. Go check me out on there, where I post about videos I'm putting out and other content. And there's also a Halloween Collectors Podcast Twitter to tell you what's going on with the podcast. Media onslaught everywhere you go, so people can find you. So there you have it, my top 5 favorite horror films of the 1960s. Do me a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, help people find this video. Do me a favor down below, let me know your top 5 horror films from the 1960s. Curious to see what made your list? That was on my list. It's tough to whittle down to 5. That's why these top 5s are tougher than top 10s. Top 10s are a lot easier because there's a lot more movies I'd love to put in there, but I just try to keep it to a top 5. Maybe I'll do some top 10s down the road or part 2s like I mentioned before. But be sure to like, subscribe to this channel or my other socials. Hit that like button. It helps people find it, like I said before. And I will talk to you soon.